The Sega Dreamcast released 26 years ago. Being the first video game home console released in the 6th generation, it not only pushed the boundaries of 3D gaming in the late 90s, but also gave gamers a glimpse into the future of online multiplayer. Although the official online service has been down for well over a decade now, members of the Dreamcast community have worked together in reviving various Dreamcast games back online. Since I've already covered the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 2 in this series, I took it upon myself and spent well over a month exploring various Dreamcast Online experiences and the communities surrounding them. This is exploring dead Dreamcast Online games. But before we begin, I would like to give a quick shout out to the following Discord communities as well as YouTube members for their support in the creation of this video. From the Sega Online Discord channel, Holstein, Toast with the Most, Mikshen, Mechanic, and fellow YouTube members Hurdy and Small Kyler. Thank you guys so much for the support, it is greatly appreciated. To start this video off, I wanted to cover a game that not only was unique to the platform, but went on to influence many of the franchises that we know today. I'm talking about Phantasy Star Online. Being the first MMO to be released on a home console, Phantasy Star Online was an action RPG created by the Sonic team, the same folks behind the ever so beloved Sonic Adventure 2. Originally, the game was online for about 6 years, with the service shutting down in April of 2007. Fast forward 2 years later, and a private server known as Silverant was released to the public to celebrate the 10th year anniversary of the Sega Dreamcast's launch. Growing up, I remember playing the GameCube version of PSO, but only in offline mode. Being curious and wanting to take a trip down memory lane, I imported a Dreamcast from Japan and built what is called a Dream Pi. Basically, it's a Raspberry Pi running an image that converts a Dreamcast's dial-up to a broadband connection, also allowing you to use it over Wi-Fi. Pretty cool. When you start PSO for the first time, you're given a choice of 3 different classes to play as: the Hunters, Rangers, and Forces. The Hunters is a predominantly melee-oriented class, being able to use weapons like a katana or a saber. Best suited for someone looking for more of a well-rounded build to start out with. Meanwhile, the Rangers class specializes in firearms, with more of a heavier focus on range combat, while the Forces is Phantasy Star's take on the Mage class, taking on more of a supportive role. They can do things like cast magic on the enemies, and also revive fallen teammates. There is something for everyone here, and I liked how easy it was to figure out which class suited me best without feeling overwhelmed by stats and all that jazz. Anyways, I ended up choosing the character Romar, as I vividly remember playing as a ranger on the GameCube back in the day. After I was done making my fella look dope, I was finally ready to dial in and revisit Phantasy Star Online again. The first place the game drops you into is a ship known as Pioneer 2. This is the main social hub where you spend a lot of your time in. It takes place in this futuristic cyberpunk-like city, made up of neon lights, NPCs to interact with, as well as flying cars coasting by in the far distance. The area itself is quite small but does offer shops to buy and sell loot from, a hospital that can heal you, portals that take you to different regions of the world, and the Hunters Guild, where you can accept quests from. During my first few hours of the game, I was a bit confused on what to do exactly. Phantasy Star really doesn't tell you where to go or what needs to be completed. Instead, it expects you, the player, to figure those things out. You can run over to the Hunters Guild and choose from a variety of different quests. These range from your typical fetch quests that you come to expect from an MMO. Stuff like going into a particular area, killing monsters in a time limit, to having to find and retrieve an item, then bring it back to Pioneer 2. Or you can simply ignore quests altogether and hop into a portal, allowing you to explore Phantasy Star Online's world on your own terms. That being said, if you're new to Phantasy Star, I would still recommend doing quests starting out, as they provide additional lore and help get your feet wet when learning the combat system. Speaking of which, that's something that you spend a lot of your time doing in this game. The best way I can describe it is that it feels like a mesh of both Monster Hunter and Diablo. By default, you're given 2 different attack abilities, one being a longer yet more powerful attack to a quicker but less lethal light attack mode. One of PSO's signature features is how the combat system has a certain rhythm to it. Take the light attack for example. If you mash the X button, the most that you'll be able to shoot in one consecutive draw is 2 shots. However, if you manage to space out every 2 seconds per click, it gives you an extra shot and over time becomes a lot easier to pull off. The game also deploys a lock-on system that works most of the time. When it does, it comes in very handy and can take out crowds of monsters with ease. When it doesn't properly lock on, it becomes the vein of your existence. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's broken, rather more or less spotty at times when you least expect. Another key aspect of Phantasy Star's gameplay revolves around this thing called a mag. The best way I can describe it is that it's like a pet that hovers around your shoulders. It has its own separate stats that you can boost by feeding it drugs that you find out in the open world. Mags also make it much easier to level up with and play more of a significant role later on in the game. If I had to knock PSO's nuts, I would say using the camera in this game is kinda ass. Since there isn't a dual thumbstick on the controller, you instead use the L button to recenter the camera based on whatever you're looking at. When you're running around Pioneer 2 or shooting the shit with the fellas, this really isn't a big deal. But in situations like facing off against a bunch of monsters in an open area, it just feels a lot more awkward to use. So by no means is this a deal breaker, just an aspect that necessarily hasn't aged the best. So you might be asking yourself, what does an MMO feel like to play on a Dreamcast controller? Well, not for nothing, it's actually pretty solid. You can access all the important shit quite easily, with being able to switch between weapons and items in-game on the fly. Another aspect that PSO does differently is in its chat system. It offers two ways to communicate with each other, both by using a keyboard and using what the game calls symbol chat. It is essentially a card that appears on screen with various pre-made responses that one would use. What makes this feature so interesting is that it also includes a built-in editor that allows you to create your own custom messages. There's a ton of options that you can manipulate and change to your liking, basically giving you free range to create whatever you feel like. Come to think of it, I wouldn't be surprised if this tool went on to inspire the Create the Emblem feature found both in the Halo and Call of Duty series. Side note, but I love how each stage had its own unique feeling to it. The forest, for an example, feels like a never-ending maze, made up of waterfalls that can be seen in the far distance, the cool details like sunlight beaming through tree branches, the fighting for endless waves of robots and mechs inside this futuristic mine. It's all perfectly captured and detailed to a T. It was honestly a breath of fresh air, as I don't find modern AAA games nearly as inventive or creative nowadays, at least in my opinion. Anyways, after dying more times than I like to admit, I came to the conclusion that PSO is much easier with a group of people than approaching it solo. One of my fondest encounters that I had with the community happened on a random Sunday afternoon. After dialing in, I came across a group of fellas wanting to try out what is called Challenge Mode, being considered the pinnacle of PSO. Challenge Mode works like this. Up to 4 players had to traverse through 9 separate stages and clear 46 areas in under 7 hours. Each player's level is reset to level 1, enemies spawn at random every time you play through it, and oh yeah, your entire team only has 1 life. If anyone manages to die during your run, it's an instant game over. The game even goes the extra mile to mess with you by pulling tricks like spawning a fake teleporter in the map just to send you straight into a trap. I can't recall the last time I played something so grueling outside of maybe Elden Ring as of lately, but god damn this was hard. Anyhow, the actual run was somewhat short-lived. At first, it started out quite strong, with our team working together and clearing through rooms like water. Where it all fell apart happened when we got to the boss fight with the dragon. Fighting the dragon is a video game equivalent to pissing out a kidney stone. His moveset is easy to predict as it cycles between him flying and digging around the arena to shooting flames out of his mouth. What makes him annoying is that if you're a new player, a single hit from this guy can instantly kill you. Despite our best efforts, what you say? We simply failed to take him out and decided to call it quits for the rest of the day. Now, a lot of Phantasy Star's community comes together every Wednesday night. I decided to stop by and came across these dudes by the name Soul, Dronus, and HPX. We talked to each other for a bit until we all eventually decided to take a run for the ruins, considered one of the hardest parts in the game. The ruins is best described as a 3-part dungeon. It basically amounts to you running into a room, fighting a bunch of enemies, solving the odd puzzle here and there, rinse and repeat for about an hour. I liked how each segment progressively felt more sinister and creepier the farther you explored it. The Sonic team nailed the whole feeling to a T, especially in its soundtrack. We eventually made it to the final boss, known as Dark Falls, if I'm saying that right. Since I somehow managed to walk into the final boss fight without any weapons to use, I resorted to kickboxing this dude instead. The fellas were eventually able to take him out, with the game ending with this cool screenshot of your entire squad posing. My boy Dronus decided to celebrate by spamming the game's chat with this gnarly ass image of an emoji dropping a fat log. Afterwards, my friend Soul gave me both 20k in cash as well as a custom mag called Mark III. Thank you so much, man. I'll try not to lose it. This was one of the many examples on just how friendly and supportive the community here is. I once joined this lobby where this dude by the name, I shit you not, PlayStation 3, didn't like how I was still at level 1 and offered to go out of his way to help me grind XP as well as build my character. Him and this cool ass dude by the name Amnesia took me for parts of the forest, and we even managed to take out the dragon together. We ended up spending the rest of the Friday night talking to each other and two other fellas by the name Luke and Zeon, telling jokes to each other, or attempting to in my case, going on about the new VMU2 that just got announced, and sharing stories about playing PSO back in its heyday. I encountered a lot of people in the community who've been around since its original launch way back in 2001. One of the members was telling me that they managed to record day one footage of the GameCube version online back in the day using a VHS. Very clean. My time with Phanstar Online was nothing short but exceptional. This was a reason to own a Dreamcast back in 2001, and honestly still is the case 25 years later. If you want to give it a try for yourself or revisit this old chestnut, I included various PSO private server Discord channels in the description down below. But yeah, if you haven't guessed already, I strongly recommend giving it a try. After I was done with PSO, I wanted to check out to see if there's any first-person shooters still online on the Dreamcast. Turns out that there's only one left, that being Quake 3 Arena. Quake is a series that took over the gaming landscape in the 90s. Everyone and their dog were porting this game virtually onto every system and home console at the time, with the Dreamcast being no exception. Known for supporting a mouse and keyboard, as well as having a total player lobby size limit of 4 people, it's a port that I've always been interested in trying out. Before we jump into online, we gotta create a character first. You first start by giving your fella a title. Quake also allows you to change the font colors in your name too. It's a fun, silly way to make yourself stand out. Speaking of color, you can also change the color of your dude's outfit, change what the crosshairs look like on screen, and give yourself a handicap if you so desire. Quake 3 also gives you a wide range of wacky character models to play as. There's a skeleton named Bones, a walking eyeball named Orb, a dude who resembles a thumb, and my favorite, the Doom guy. One of the first things I noticed was just how good this game looks. The devs did a great job of capturing the PC look to a T. The lighting and the effects really show off just how capable the hardware was for its time. It's not until you start to play it is when you realize that, oh yeah, this is on a Dreamcast. Since the DC controller lacks a dual thumbstick layout, the developers opted to use the A, B, X, Y face buttons to move across the environment, with the joystick being allocated to aim with. It reminded me a lot of playing a first-person shooter on a PSP back in the day, as it had a very similar control scheme. Since I was determined just to use a Dreamcast controller, it also forces you to adopt a different playstyle than what you come to expect with a Quake title. Instead of it being a 2-4 loco deep type of experience that you get on the PC, playing with the controller turns it into more of an on-rail shooter. It basically amounts to you bunny hopping across the map until you find someone, then coming to a complete stop and praying that your aim isn't complete shit. Anyways, it's not the worst setup out there, and after a few hours, you somewhat get used to it, but I wouldn't recommend playing competitively with it. Combat, on the other hand, is your traditional experience that you come to expect for an arena shooter. Everyone spawns with the same default weapon, with guns having to be picked up across the map. Speaking of which, you've got some classics, like the railgun, one that shoots out a bolt of lightning, and of course, the BFG. It is one of those games that are easy to pick up and play, but hard to master, something that honestly all competitive shooters should aspire to be. Now, Quake 3's community on the Dreamcast is split between two different versions of the game, the official release and the community-created modded version that replaces all the maps with custom-created ones from the PC. Let's start with the official version first. Going by the server browser, it appears there's still a few people playing online. It turns out that this isn't exactly true. The player population population here is very small, with the vast majority of the servers being run by bots that play 24/7. Depending on the server, the bots range from being incredibly difficult to kill, they kinda doing their own thing and aimlessly running around the map. Sometimes they'll even go as far as using in-game chat, and I've even seen them talk to each other in a rather awkward, robotic fashion. They do have their limitations though. A lot of them don't actually roam the map, rather stick to a particular path the entire time. Even if you manage to get their attention, they always stay in that area no matter what. One weird thing about the bots is that if you start a match, leave, then join again, they'll still be playing against each other despite no one actually being there. Kinda creepy. In my experience, you tend to find more people in the modded version nowadays. So let's go check that out and see what we can find. I hopped on a Friday night on a server called Mech's Custom Free-for-All 2 with about 2 others in-game. Loading into the map, you're presented with a crusty JPEG of some homemade Dreamcast baked goods. Not gonna lie, that actually looks pretty damn tasty. Once I joined the server, I was instantly greeted by a friendly dude named Tact. We spent some time catching up, as I spoke to him a few months prior on the exact same server. After he nearly destroyed my Dreamcast, we decided afterwards to check out a few maps in this mod. The first one that caught my eye was this map called Hydra Pool. Hydra is best described as a small arena style map, taking place inside an indoor pool. The flow and pacing here accommodates the 4-player size limit perfectly, without it feeling too big or too small where it feels too sweaty. And oh yeah, there's also a functioning swimming pool here that you can use too. Very clean. You also have this dope ass stadium map called Wii Mii. Considered one of the largest in this collection, it takes place in this coliseum, made up of jump pads and pieces of land hovering across the level. I liked how Wii Mii has a heavier emphasis on verticality and giving the player options on how they want to approach the map. Its performance can be dicey at times, but it also serves as proof on just how capable the Dreamcast hardware is. Myself and Tack also had the chance to play on this map set inside a medieval castle. It starts you on the ground, with a drop bridge leading you directly into a castle's courtyard. I just love how well detailed this map was, with the whole castle vibe giving it a very unique feeling. During my time on this map, Tack mentioned that there's an option in the Dreamcast version to play in a third-person perspective. It's honestly kinda funky. I found aiming in particular to be a lot easier, as a Dreamcast controller tends to work better from a third-person perspective. That being said, playing an arena shooter at this angle just feels wrong. It's a cool feature, don't get me wrong, just something that I wouldn't pick over playing it in first person. Then you have a port from 2 Fort from the Team Fortress games. I believe this one was a prototype and not included in the actual release of TF Classic, but nonetheless, it kinda is the same experience, albeit with a smaller size and lacking the tunnels found in the original release. Anyways, it's pretty much the same experience you get with 2 Fort, so there's a lot to love here. Now, if the community could port TF Classic to the Dreamcast, that would be amazing. One aspect that I found very goofy is how the developers behind this mod went as far as replacing every map's loading screen with a custom image. A lot of them reference various Dreamcast community members, but you do have a few nutty ones thrown into the mix. There is an image of your typical Discord mod setup, a selfie with Steve-O from Jackass.
Yeah, dude.
This dude crashing what looks like a golf cart in an advert for Bush Ice. This is just scratching the surface, as there's well over 10 maps in this collection. If you decide to explore it yourself, I'll leave a link to the image in the description of this video. If I had to choose between playing the modded version or the original, I'd say that the modded version was a lot more enjoyable. It just offered more variety in terms of maps, and didn't feel like every single level that I would play on was an arena. That being said, Quake 3 on the Dreamcast is a great example on how to port a PC game to a console. It runs at a stable frame rate, visually holds up nicely to its PC counterpart, and retains the same addicting experience that made the game so special. If you're a fan of finding obscure ways to enjoy PC games, then Quake 3 Arena on the Sega Dreamcast is for you. Racing its way onto the list, we have Daytona USA. If you've never heard of or had the chance to play it before, Daytona USA was an arcade racing game created by Sega. It was originally released on the Saturn before being ported over to the Dreamcast, with the game receiving a massive graphical overhaul and supporting analog controls. One cool fact about the Saturn version is that it also offered online play too. I've always been curious to check out the Saturn's online community, so let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see that in a future video. Anyways, a lot of people used to play this back in the early 2000s, so I decided to host a game on a Monday afternoon in hopes that I'd find someone. Within 30 minutes, my boy Totus10 joined out of the blue, giving myself the opportunity to experience it for the very first time. Before you can even hop into the race, you first need to select a car. The game gives you around 6 different rides to choose from, each with their own individual stats that separate themselves from each other. Daytona also lets you choose what type of tires that you want to bring onto the track. It ranges from soft tires, being suited for someone who prefers more grip and control, while the harder compound tires require more skill to use, but also allow you the freedom to bring out your inner Takumi. Within the first 5 minutes in the Daytona USA, I noticed just how well this game has aged graphically. Things like the car's texture model, the skybox, hell, even environmental details really stood out to me. You can clearly tell how much of a technological leap the Saturn was to the Dreamcast, and I think this is a great example of that generational gap. Daytona USA is also very easy to pick up and play for someone who's played an arcade racing game before. Weirdly enough, it kinda reminded me of Crazy Taxi in terms of how the car handled and the overall speed that you travel at. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's nearly as batshit crazy quite like Crazy Taxi, but they do have some similarities to them. The only thing I found that didn't age the best is steering using the Dreamcast's thumbstick. It's kinda hard to describe without physically handing you a controller, but it just feels off. You lose a level of precision that you find in other controllers, like the DualShock 2 for an example, and makes it feel a lot more janky to maneuver with. I have read online that the Dreamcast arcade controller is significantly better to use, so if you happen to have one of those still laying around, I guess you're in luck. Daytona USA also offers a nice amount of diverse tracks to race on. You have your typical maps that offer your traditional racing affair, such as the classic 3.7 Speedway. There's also one called Seaside Street Galaxy, being one of the largest tracks in the game. This one was pretty dope. It starts you off on this bridge, which eventually leads you directly into a city. On the other side of the track, it takes place next to a waterfront and a space station that you can see from a distance. Then you have Desert City. It takes place inside the sprawling canyon, made up of mountains to climb and a shit ton of twists and turns to keep things interesting. That being said, Desert City was alright, I guess. I wish there was more of an actual desert theme to the map. Imagine if it took place in something like the desert in Fallout New Vegas, for an example. That'd actually be kinda dope, I'm not gonna lie. On top of that, there's a few other tracks, like one taking place inside a natural park, and a few other fun ones. To summarize, there's a track for everyone here, and I think that every single one brought the best aspects of Daytona USA's gameplay. Daytona USA is hands down one of the best online racing games on the Dreamcast. It offers a great amount of content, keeping the experience fresh, while not being complicated to understand for those unfamiliar to the genre. Its simplicity is its biggest benefit and becomes a real riot with a few of your buddies. Definitely don't sleep on Daytona USA 2001. Next up, we have the first game to support online multiplayer on the Dreamcast, that being the ever so creative Chu Chu Rocket. Chu Chu Rocket is best described as an action puzzler created once again by the Sonic team. According to an article that I found while researching the title, it was originally pitched as a way for the team to gain experience building an online game. This eventually led the Sonic team to use the knowledge learned from Chu Chu Rocket to develop Phanstar Online 2.5 years later. I have always heard about Chu Chu Rocket, but never had the chance to experience it for myself, so I managed to stumble upon a community game night hosted by the Sega Online Discord channel, and finally had the chance to see what it was all about. When you dial in, the game greets you with a chat room. This acts as a main social hub to where you can find and arrange matches from. You can do things like check out any of the game's recent updates, compare yourself to others using a fully functional leaderboard system, or test out to see if the game's chat will censor cuss words or not. I really dig how simplistic the UI is in this game. It kinda reminded me of something straight out of Windows 95. Anyways, me and the fellas ended up forming a squad and jumped straight into a match. This is when I quickly realized that I have zero idea on what I'm supposed to do. Chu Chu Rocket's pace is incredibly fast, requiring your full attention at all times. Thankfully, the gameplay loop is quite easy to understand once you can manage to wrap your head around it. The main objective of Chu Chu Rocket is simple. Up to 4 players start each match with a rocket. The game takes place on a game board, filled with mice that you need to redirect to your ship, with whoever having the most amount captured in under 3 minutes winning the round, sending their rocket into outer space. Each player is given arrows that they can place on the board that pushes mice into 4 different directions. On top of this, there's these cats that appear from time to time that you need to avoid capturing, as they reduce the amount of points that you currently have. To make it even more interesting, Chu Chu has this game show-like element to the experience. Throughout the match, a giant game show wheel will appear on screen that completely alters how the gameplay flows. This can range from the game spawning mice on screen, rearranging to where your rocket ship is placed on the board, slowing down the pace altogether, to spawning in a barrage of cats. It complements the chaotic nature quite well and keeps the gameplay from feeling dull and repetitive. I like to describe Chu Chu Rocket as a Dreamcast's equivalent to something like Mario Party. The game practically encourages you to be a clever D-bag if you want to stand a chance at winning the match. It's no different than having that one friend who can't accept losing at a game, so they resort to doing greasy shit like unplugging your controller last minute, then immediately acting like nothing ever happened. If that's too much to handle, there's also the ability to create your own puzzles in-game. One cool aspect about this tool is that you can actually share it over the internet with others and they can play on it together. For 1998, it's pretty forward-thinking considering this feature is still being used to this day. Another interesting quirk is how the game has a built-in web browser. It doesn't let you surf the internet outside of being able to explore Chu Chu Rocket's homepage. From here, you can check out upcoming community events, recent updates to the server, as well as being able to download skins that changes the game's appearance. It also has the added benefit of functioning just like it would on dial-up, more or less serving as a friendly reminder on just how far the internet has come in over 20 years. Outside of that, Chu Chu Rocket is a small yet enjoyable experience. It was sold at a budget price back in the day, and it's one of those quote-unquote what you see is what you get type of game. Nonetheless, Chu Chu Rocket still holds up as a creative, original puzzler that doesn't get enough recognition nowadays. If you can manage to tolerate it, I'd recommend trying it out at least once. Moving on to the list, we have a Dreamcast port that never left Japan. I'm talking about Mobile Suit Gundam Federation vs. Zeon. Being the last Dreamcast title to offer online play, Federation vs. Zeon is a third-person fighting game taking place, well, if you haven't guessed already, in the Mobile Suit Gundam universe. Judging by the gameplay videos that I could find on YouTube, it looked like a ton of fun. So once again, I met up with the same fellas from the Sega Online Discord channel and had a chance to go explore it for the very first time. Before you can hop straight into the game, you have to select your Gundam first. Mobile Suit gives you a wide range of Gundams to play as, each with their own unique abilities and weapons. I decided to pick this dude by the name RX-77 since he looked badass. Before each match begins, the game displays a map layout on screen with arrows pointing to where yourself and the other team will spawn at, followed by a pop-up window of your pilot talking to you in Japanese. The character design kinda reminded me of something straight out of that Daft Punk Interstellar movie from the early 2000s. Anyways, the first match dropped us into what looks like the surface of the moon. I believe the game mode that we were playing on was Deathmatch, as there wasn't any other objective that I noticed outside of beating the living shit out of each other. Each Gundam has their own playstyles and weapons that they can use. For an example, the RX-77 Gundam is both equipped with a rifle as well as a pair of rockets that's strapped to his shoulders. The RX-78 Gundam, on the other hand, gives you both a ball and chain to use, as well as this dope-ass saber. Then you got this Gundam called the Mach 03 that hovers around the environment, being able to send a barrage of missiles at a moment's notice. Combat felt responsive, and not for nothing, it's a lot of fun. I believe Federation vs. Zeon was originally an arcade game before being ported to the Dreamcast, and it really shows. When you're not dealing with a ton of latency, it can be rewarding as well as very addicting. One aspect that I thought was cool is how at the end of each match, the game will play a replay of the game-winning kill, similar to how it works in titles like Modern Warfare 2 for an example. Mobile Suit does handle it differently, as it's much more scripted and a lot more explosive. Although my time here was brief, I did get the chance to check out a few of its levels. One of the maps that stuck out to me the most took place in outer space. On this map, there isn't any debris or rocks to take cover against, just yourself and 3 others duking it out. It might not be the most awe-inspiring level out there, but it does make up for it in just how gorgeous the skybox, or in this case, the space box was. There was also this map that took place between a canyon and what I think is supposed to resemble an airport. It's made up of 2 different layers that you can maneuver through, giving the gameplay a heavier focus on verticality compared to the other maps that I played on. The only issue I had here is that it's prone to spawn killing, as you really don't have much room to work with. One of the more quirkier maps that I had a chance to play on took place in this underground city. I like to describe it as a close quarters arena style level where you take cover against various city towers. It almost felt like the developers took inspiration from those city playmats we had as kids and decided to make a map out of it. Outside of that, it's an alright map. The dude singing in the background of the game definitely gave me a chuckle. Mobile Suit Gundam Federation vs. Zeon is an experience that any fan of the series should try at least once on the Dreamcast. It's an approachable, straightforward title that still holds up graphically, at least on the console. If you're looking for a beat 'em up to play over the internet on a Dreamcast, then it really doesn't get much better than Mobile Suit Gundam. I also had the chance to play a few other Dreamcast games over the internet. One of them was called Alien Front Online. It's a third-person vehicular combat game best known for supporting up to 8 players, as well as offering fully functional in-game voice chat. I tried this one a few times, and despite my best efforts, I simply failed to connect to a game. Some Dreamcast games require you to set up what is called a DMZ on your router in order to play them, with Alien Front being no exception here. I did try this, but that didn't seem to make a difference, at least in my case. I plan on revisiting this game again in a future video, so stay tuned for that. Then you got Ooga Booga. Now, I was only able to play this one online for about 15 minutes. That being said, Ooga Booga is best described as a beat-em-up fighting game taking place on an island. There's a variety of wacky characters that you can choose from, it's simple to understand, and doesn't take itself too seriously. On the other hand, Ooga Booga is quite repetitive and doesn't really do anything that stood out to me, outside of this character model showing his bare ass on screen. If you got an hour to kill, it's definitely worth giving it a shot. I also tried a few online racing games while I was at it. Let's start with good old 4x4 Evolution. As the name implies, it's an off-road racing game that offers a ton of customization options, as well as a wide variety of licensed vehicles to drive. I did get the chance to play this for about 25 minutes during a community event that happened not too long ago. From what I remember, it was an enjoyable racing game that meshes realistic physics. Jesus. From what I remembered, it was an enjoyable racing game that meshes realistic physics into an arcadey type of experience. I'm hoping to do a Dreamcast Online stream sometime soon, so I'll definitely give it a try there. That being said, I did get the chance to play Pod 2. Having no real-life connection to the band of the same name, Pod was a futuristic racing series created by Ubisoft out of all companies. It takes inspiration from the Mario Kart series, giving you items they can pick up and use against each other. Outside of that, it's just your run-of-the-mill late 90s racing game. If I had to choose, I'd still take LEGO Racers on a Nintendo 64 over Pod 2 any day of the week. And that was exploring dead Dreamcast Online games. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm planning on doing a video where I explore bad PlayStation 2 and Nintendo Wii ports in the near future. I'm also working on a dead Xbox 360 video too, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, if you enjoy this style of content, please consider leaving your boy a like or even a subscription, it's greatly appreciated. But until next time fellas, peace.